is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Chuds BBQ. My name is Bradley Robinson, and today I'm going to show you how I made this beautiful, delicious, flavorful, dried, amazing South African beef jerky, aka Biltong. Coming up. This is some meat. Pat it dry. And what I got here is a chunk of bottom round. I think this is what biltong is typically made out of. Over there, I believe they call it silver side, but it's a lean muscle from the back end of the animal. Nice little fat cap on there. Wish it was a little bit thicker. And then over here, I've also got a picanha, which might be blasphemous, but I think it's gonna work out really well. But really what you're looking for is a rather tough piece of meat, typically from the back end of the cow near the butt, like a top round, bottom round, a sirloin, or pretty much any lean cut that's got a fat cap on it. Because all the biltong I've ever had has a nice little chunk of fat on it, and it's really tasty. And unfortunately, both of these cuts are pretty small, but I think it'll work out just fine. If you're unfamiliar with biltong, it's a South African meat snack, which is most often compared to beef jerky. And I've ordered it online before, and it's really good stuff, and I've always wanted to try and make it, and it turns out it's pretty easy. But first thing we need to do is cut this down, thinking about maybe an inch or so. Nothing too big, because the thicker it is, the longer it's gonna take to dry. So something like that is kind of what I'm after today. And I'm gonna have some small little chunks of biltong. I was kind of hoping to find a nice big roast so I could have some big slabs of it, but this is gonna work out just fine. Beautiful. Cutting with the grain here, which is a lot easier to see on this picanha. Nip this end off, and same on this piece. Probably should have trimmed that silver skin off. Might do that here in a minute. And just like that, all cut up. Let's go ahead and get our spice mix ready. Starting by dry toasting our coriander. So into a hot dry pan, I'm going in with our whole coriander seeds, and we're just gonna dry toast this until we see a little bit of smoke coming out and it starts smelling really good. And just like that, smelling really good. A little bit of smoke coming off, but nothing is burned. Just trying to release the oil. So now into the spice grinder to get this all ground up. Whew. Not going for ultra fine here, just something like that looks pretty good to me. Maybe one more. Perfect. I'm also gonna do the same with some fennel. And grind that up as well. And then lastly, in with some black peppercorns and some red chili flakes if you want it to have a little bit of kick to it. And get that all blended up as well. Beautiful. This is smelling real good already, but one last thing I'm going in with is a little bit of garlic powder. Get that all mixed up and our spices are ready. And now, all we gotta do is get the cure on our meat. Starting by going in with our salt. This is just some kosher salt. And I looked at a bunch of biltong recipes, and I based my salt calculation off of Eric's from Two Guys in a Cooler. It's an equilibrium brine. And if you haven't seen his video, I highly recommend it. It's very informative. And he's got a calculator on his website where you can type in the amount of meat you have, and it'll tell you all the spices he uses. I'm using some of his and some of my own, but definitely go check out his video if you're new to biltong. So again, just trying to get this salt evenly distributed. I could mix this in with all the liquids, but this just seemed a little bit easier because there's really not all that much liquid going in. And once fully salted, now we're gonna go on with some red wine vinegar, some Worcestershire sauce, and some honey, just for a little bit of sweetness. The sweetness is optional, but I hear a lot of people like to do it over in South Africa. And we're just gonna get that all mixed around. Ooh. Before going in with about half of our spice mixture here. Just trying to get an even coat. And I gotta tell you, so far, I'm really liking biltong compared to traditional US beef jerky. No meat slicers are involved, no liquid smoke in sight, and it smells really good. Beautiful. Trying to get a nice even layer of meat in there to make sure we soak up all that goodness. And now into the fridge this goes overnight. But you could leave this in there for probably up to 3-4 days. Not really gonna be a problem because it is an equilibrium brine, so we're not gonna over salt it. But really we just want that salt and all that vinegar and stuff to really do some work on the meat and let all those flavors soak in. So we'll check back in on this in a day or two. 1.5 days later, let's check back in on this biltong. And I went a little longer than 24 hours because, quite frankly, I forgot. But that's completely fine. Probably made it better. But if we take a look at this stuff, it looks pretty good. Feels a little bit more tight. Smells amazing. All that coriander in there. Love it. So now to add even more flavor, I'm gonna take the rest of our spice mix, another little tip I picked up from Eric, and we're gonna go over the top just to add a little extra flavor and a little extra texture, which I think is gonna be really good. Woo-hoo. And now that this biltong is fully cured, fully seasoned, all there's left to do now is hang this up and let it dry. And to do that, I'm gonna grab myself a little hook here, which I put a little piece of tape on. I'm gonna try and just jam this right on through. Oh, perfect. That went through so easily. And the reason I have this hook on here is because I'm gonna weigh this out. 126 grams. Now I'm gonna mark that down And the reason I'm writing this down is because biltong can be many different textures. And that's determined by the amount of weight loss we achieve during the hanging process. The more moisture that we dry out of these things, the more dry it's gonna be, the tighter it's gonna be, the more beef jerky-like it'll be. And the more moisture we leave in, the softer and more tender the biltong will be. And that's really up to you. And that's the beauty of doing a big batch like this, is I'm gonna test it at different hydrations and see which one I like the best, you know? Whether that's 50%, 60%. So what I'm gonna do in a couple days is take this out, weigh it, figure out what the weight loss percentage is, and when I find the texture I like, that's when I'll pull them off. So I'm gonna weigh the rest of these out and hang them up. Now when it comes to drying your biltong, it differs from beef jerky because it's not smoked, although I really do want to put some smoke on it, but because it's the first time I'm making it, I want to do it traditionally, and next time I make it, I'll probably put some cold smoke on it, but let me know if you want me to make a video about that. But unlike beef jerky, instead of being smoked and put in a dehydrator, it's just hung up to dry naturally, around 70, 75 degrees with a 50 to 60% humidity. And you can do that in a biltong box, which you can make pretty easily with a fan and a light bulb. You can do that in a dry aging machine or a curing box. But luckily, 70, 75 degrees, 50, 60% humidity is pretty much room temp in my house upstairs at all times. So what I'm gonna do is head up to that room right there, and I'm gonna hang them on a wire rack and let them dry for a good 5-6 days. So I got it hung up on this wire rack right here. I got the smaller ones up front because they're probably gonna dry the quickest. I've got the window opened up a little bit to have a nice gentle breeze. And on this little thermometer here, you can see that we're rocking right about 74 degrees, 48% humidity, which is a little bit drier than I should have it. But when I checked it this morning, it was about 55, so we're getting pretty close. But if it does get too dry in here, I have a humidifier that I can always turn on. So we're gonna just let these hang out for about 5 days before we check in on them, let them dry out a little bit. Got a pan down here to catch any drippings. And we're just gonna let these guys go. And I really wish I had some bigger slabs. These are kind of puny looking, but I think it's gonna work out just fine. 7 days later. Let's take a look at this biltong. And it did take about 7 days. I had a scale up there and I would just periodically come up and weigh them every day. And most of these are rocking right around 55% hydration at this point. And I think it's time to dive in and see how they came out. Obviously some of these thinner ones are probably a little bit drier. Some of these thicker ones are probably a little more hydrated. So we're gonna have some different experiences here. But this one weighed 124 grams and I weighed it with the hook on there. So if we weigh this now, it's 68 grams. So I think that's right around 55%. But what I'm gonna do now is go through and take all these hooks out, which is a lot more difficult than I was expecting. And we'll take a few slices. I will say though, I'm liking the way it's looking. It's kind of got that bark on the outside from all those dry seasonings. Definitely looks like a dry aged piece of meat, but just gonna get some nice thin slices out of here. And there we have it, some homemade biltong. Looking really nice, loving that color in there. Not dried all the way through, still got a little bit of red color in there, but looking very nice. And you gotta love a process that's like 90% hands off. I'm just gonna go at this with a knife, but I suppose you could bust down a mandolin or meat slicer. If I had any bigger slabs, I might consider the meat slicer, but not today. And there we have it, a cute little pile of some homemade biltong. Let's go for one of these picanha pieces. That one definitely got a little more dried. You can see that there's not as much red in there, so that might be more your style if you like it a little drier and a little less tender. But with the big fat cap on there, I think it should work out just fine. But that fat feels really nice, and it looks pretty good. And I'm now realizing how much biltong I actually made. But that's good, because I'll just vac seal it up, have it for a while. And there it is, folks, all sliced up, looking really good. As you can see, we've got some different colors, some different textures going on, and I think it's time to dive on in. Gotta tell you folks, I've been wanting to make my own biltong for a long time now, and I'm pretty happy with how this is looking, but it's all about how it tastes. Ooh, that's really good. Really liking the texture on that one. It's chewy, but it's not too tough. The fat cap adds a nice amount of lubrication to the mouth. The flavor is great too, a lot of coriander, and it's definitely very beef jerky-like. I'm sorry if that's offensive to call this stuff beef jerky, but that's the only thing I can compare it to for us Americans. That's a perfect snack. It's not overpowering in any direction, but it's perfectly seasoned, chewy, but not too chewy. Loving the fat cap on there. Love the exterior little bark we have from all the extra seasoning. That's just good food right there. It definitely tastes nothing like American beef jerky. You know, it's not covered in soy sauce and Worcestershire and super smoky, things like that. It does have a decent little kick to it. Nothing too spicy. I wouldn't call it spicy, but I think the chili flakes in there are starting to add up. But let's go for this piece. A little more dry, more of an end cut, a little longer too. That's good too. The flavor starts building up after a couple of pieces. This is like a perfect road trip snack. Pretty juicy too. Probably because of that fat cap. First I was bummed out by some of these super tiny ones, but perfect thing to pop back during a movie or something. Ooh, that was a good one. Very thin. Oh, I would be interested if I marinated it less in that vinegar, if the color would be different, because a lot of these are pretty dark all the way through, although when I hold it up to the light, I can see through it, so. I wonder how much impact that vinegar has on the meat. Tastes very good. So next time I do this, and I'm definitely gonna do this again, I think the things I'm gonna focus on is finding a bigger cut of meat, because I'd love to have a slab of this stuff instead of a lot of these little guys, because some of those tiny ones, you know, we've got a lot of pieces this size, which is fine, but a lot more knife work. Although the bite-size ability is nice. And other than that, I definitely want to throw a little bit of smoke on this. I think that would be a very welcome addition to that flavor profile. But let me know in the comments below if that's blasphemy or not, because this is fine by itself. And it's so easy to make. I mean, come on. Just hang it in your kitchen for like 5-6 days. 7 in my case. It's dry yet tender. Very bizarre, but I like it. But before I devour way too much of this stuff, I think it's time for the official taste test. All right, y'all, and that is it. That is how to make some absolutely fantastic homemade South African biltong. I highly recommend giving this one a try. It really is a tasty treat, and it's a pretty cheap cut of meat using household ingredients. And other than the fact that you have to wait a week to eat it, it's an incredibly easy process that I highly recommend giving a try very soon. But all that being said, if you enjoyed this video, let me know by hitting that subscribe button. Let YouTube know by dropping a like on this video. If you give this recipe a try for yourself, be sure to tag me on Instagram at Chuds BBQ. I'd love to see what y'all are cooking. Big shout out to all the Patreon members. Thank you for supporting Team Chud and allowing me to keep making all these videos. And until the next time I see you, please go cook something outside. Peace.